episode of Ignite Your Power, the Kathy Mou Podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that is deeply personal for me and so many of you, endometriosis. And if you've ever felt frustrated, dismissed, or stuck in a cycle of pain with no real answer, this episode is for you. I am beyond honored to welcome Katie Edmonds, a certified nutritionist, health coach, and the author of Heal Endo, a book that has changed the lives of countless women struggling with endometriosis, and me too. I love this book so much. And Katie's work goes beyond symptom management. She helps women uncover the root causes of their condition, from inflammation to gut health to immune dysfunction, offering real holistic solutions for long-term healing. So, welcome, Katie. Well, we're so
Hi.
excited to have you here today.
Yeah, I'm
Honestly,
excited.
yay! I'm so excited to dive into like certain topics, and this conversation is gonna go amazing. And I know we've met before many times. We used to do lives together on Instagram, but today
hmm
it's your first time here on my podcast. So thank you for
Yeah,
being
I really liked that live we did, maybe the last one where we talked about the nervous system. I got a lot of feedback from people saying they liked that one. That was a great topic.
Oh yeah, we should do another one because I think we talked about that because you're supposed to have another book or something come out about that, no?
I'm going to do an additional section in my book, so about 4 extra chapters. When I do my book update, is going to be straight nervous system. It's all the things we don't know. When you hear like reduce stress is almost like the worst thing you can say for someone with nervous system dysfunction. So really outlining what the nervous system is and how it interacts. Not just with the things like inflammation, immune system, it actually directs your nervous system or your the inflammation and your immune system. So they're all one and the same, right? If you're going to re-regulate the immune system to reduce inflammation, you also need to re-regulate the nervous system to stop telling your body it's in danger all the time, or else you're always going to have inflammation. So it is really, really vital part of the book that I feel like there's a missed opportunity there in discussing it. So I'm going to, yeah, do a whole nother section on that.
Yay! I love that. It's so true though, because I really feel like we're always in this fight and flight mode, and like our nervous system is so dysfunction. I know I am because
Yeah.
I'm always stressed out and our
hmm
cortisol levels are so high. So it's like your body and your nervous system is always like on alert, like and so
Yeah. And
there's
that's almost the definition of nervous system dysregulation. Like, when should you be in chronic fight, flight, or freeze? Like, if you're actually being attacked, but like you are like safe, Kathy, right? Like, you're in a nice house, you have your family, like, there aren't Roman conquerors banging down your door, going to rape you, and there's no wild animals outside who are trying to eat you for dinner, right? And you only have like a little cave to hide in. Like, our world isn't as dangerous as we think it is, but our nervous systems are behaving as if every day is life or death like that. Our nervous systems are so much more dysregulated than a hunter-gatherer tribe that is every day, depending on the earth for survival or death, right? Like, at any given moment, a tree can fall on them. They don't have firemen, they don't have antibiotics, but they aren't as dysregulated as us in these developed countries that have all of these resources at our disposal, yet we are constantly telling our bodies we are the most unsafe that it has ever been. And it couldn't be farther from the truth, right? So we have to re-regulate the way our nervous system is picking up cues so that you only have that fight or flight when like your daughter is near the gas flame and she's going to burn her hand, and you have a fight or flight moment so you can rush there to save her.
yeah.
But then it calms back down and you go back into parasympathetic for hours and hours and hours, and you're not feeling that immense sense of stress or grief or worry or anxiety, which most of us feel a lot, almost 90% of our days, right?
Yeah. And why is that? Is it because we just live in a fast-paced world or like we're consuming content all the time or like what is it that's
Those
making
absolutely play into it, right? It's multifactorial, just like endometriosis. It starts with how your parents' nervous systems were. If your parents' nervous systems were dysregulated, we mimic what they did. Not to put any blame on parents. As a parent now, I'm like, oh, we do our best. But if you are dysregulated, then your children are going to see that, and that's how they're going to learn. Then you add things like improper breathing patterns, like chest breathing, that signals stress to your body that you're worried, but it really comes from incorrect musculature. But that plays into it. Blood sugar dysregulation, too much sugar, too little activity. There's all those those things. And then on top of that, screens, the 24-hour news media, never being able just to relax. Like we have a cabin up in the woods and we just went there for the weekend and there's no service. There's no cell service up there. There's no screens or TV or anything. And it is the most relaxing feeling without realizing that they can get up there. There's no one trying to get a hold of you. There's no like, oh, I have to return this text or answer this email or do this thing on social media. It's just, you cannot do it. So you just go up there with the expectation your phone's going to be invisible. There's no computer, there's no TV. And it's this feeling of deep, like, right? So that is just right there. Without everything connecting us all the time, you can actually take a minute just to breathe, which is a great reminder that like our bodies do really well at a slower paced world, but we've gotten to be so fast paced, it kind of freaks our nervous systems out.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, I've been feeling this way. So this is a perfect topic to start our episode. I know we haven't talked about endometriosis, but our like literally that's what causes inflammation in our body. And then that causes a lot of other problems, not just people with endometriosis, but with chronic illnesses, you know? Because
Yeah, because it's a physiologic reaction. So when you are experiencing stress, say stress is kind of a word we just use um, all the time now, but if you dig down, it's like a worry or an anxiety, but your body is fearful, panicking, or feeling unsafe. That's kind of what stress is for whatever reason. Your body doesn't know why, and your nervous system doesn't want to take time to figure out why. Like, is it because someone's getting canceled on social media? Is it because you're late for a meeting that's inconsequential? It doesn't know. But when your body is feeling the panic, what it does is it floods your entire body systemically with inflammatory immune factors. And this is a life or death situation where if you're going to get clawed by a wild animal who's chasing you, which may be why you have panic, it doesn't know, that you're going to have inflammatory immune factors on hand at the wound site, already ready to start attacking the bacteria that has cut you or has gotten into your skin through a cut. So if you're in physical danger, your body can respond in the way that it knows how. It's natural antibiotics, right? Inflammation fights bacteria that has leaked into your bloodstream. Inflammation fights damage, right? That's what inflammation is. So if you aren't getting attacked and that panic doesn't end, all your body is doing then is producing inflammatory immune factors all the time. I say this is endoing. Endoing is a verb under which the body processes are fostering endometriosis in an inflammatory environment. So when you're constantly stressed or constantly anxious, panicked, whatever that emotion is for you in your body, because everyone is different, be it depression or like crazy jittering anxiety, right? They're all the very, very negative feelings of danger or worry. You're going to have all that inflammation systemically flooded through you. Your nervous system doesn't know if your arm is in danger or your foot. So that's why it pumps these immune factors through your whole body, including your peritoneal cavity where your endometriosis lesions could be. It shrinks your ability to breathe. So only chest breathing, so you can't oxygenate your body anymore. There's all of these things that go into it, and it creates the physiologic being of sickness, more or less, right? So it is directly contributing to chronic illness, to chronic inflammation, which is so much more than this old-fashioned way of, oh, stress causes endo, right? It's kind of like silly, like, oh, you're just a stressed out woman or you're just a stressed out person. So don't stress. It's very different. It's like we have to know that creates disease within the body for a specific reason. It's not like woo-woo.
that makes so much sense. Thank you for starting us with this topic because I feel like that's the basics that we should understand, all of us. And then going into understanding like what you were saying about endoing and how endometriosis actually works in our body and how that's actually created, right? On a scientific level, like people have, well, first off, people think it's a PMS problem, but it's not. It's like so much more than that, right? That we can definitely get into. But endometriosis is, like you compare it to cancer cells, which is so
Mhm.
interesting and it is so true. And I love that about how you write that in the book. If you wanted to tell the listeners more about like how those similarities are.
Yeah, let's talk about what endometriosis is and how it develops, because so many people don't know that. And knowing that this is a Endometriosis Awareness Month podcast coming out, it's one of the biggest things about endometriosis that most people don't know, including doctors and people that, say they're specialists or experts in it. They still are unfamiliar with how it develops. They say things like, we just don't know, or we need more research. And the truth is, yes, we will always need more research, especially as, we're looking at treatment plans and everything else. But we know so much about this disease. It's unbelievable when people say we don't know anything about endometriosis. I kind of want to scream. So endo starts with an endo-like cell. And this is where you may have heard that it is similar to the endometrial lining of the uterus, which is the part inside the uterus that sheds every month, right? So in endometriosis, this cell is really similar. They have similarities, but they're also really, really different. And the way I talk about it in the book is it's kind of like a beautiful beacon of fertility, like a fertility goddess that's really ripe for an egg to implant within your uterus, turned into like a jacked Navy SEAL when it's this altered. So it's genetically altered and epigenetically altered, which means it can be altered by something like chemicals or inflammation. It was normal before, but it experienced some sort of traumas that changed its behaviors. And now it's really, really gnarly. Now, this cell is actually not necessarily a problem until it's activated into endometriosis. So if you've heard that women are born with endometriosis, it's actually not true. There's never been a single baby to date born with an endometriosis lesion inside of their body. What we see is that babies can be born with endo-like cells. And this is either within the uterus, because we can have an endo-like cell placed in the normal inside the uterus where the endometrial lining is, or outside of the uterus. But again, it's not problematic unless it's activated into an endometriosis lesion. So this is a process, and it goes back to that word I say, endoing. I want us to think of endometriosis not as a noun. I got endometriosis and say, no, this was a process. This was a process that was unfolding, and it's a process that's not linear because endometriosis can progress and get worse, but it can also stabilize or regress and get better. So we see this through the research. We can talk about that later, but this is just as far as the development. You have that cell. Now, to activate it into an endometriosis lesion, you need inflammation. And you don't just need normal inflammation, you need poor inflammation with bad behavior, a dysregulated immune response. So these are immune factors that are not acting normally. So instead of seeing this bizarre abnormal cell, that it should be cleaning up. And this is what your immune system does every day. It targets tissues that are, altered, genetically altered. They're mutated. They're weird proteins. They're bacteria. They're LPS. They want to get these things out of your body. They're not supposed to be there. But with endometriosis and cancer alike, they see these cells that are very abnormal. And instead of getting rid of them, they let them stay, and moreover, they activate them into your tissue. So they will actually produce blood supply to that cell. It's a word called neoangiogenesis, the creation of new blood cells to that little cell, that little endometriosis cell that wasn't causing problems. Now we've given it blood, we've given it nutrients, we've given it lymph so it can live. We connect nerves to it. Yay! Now we have a lot of nerves in this very painful tissue that's growing where it shouldn't. Like, thanks, immune system.
Yeah.
So the exact same thing is what happens in cancer. Your immune system is what attaches the cancer cell as like a functioning part of your body. It's actually a part of your bodily systems now. It kind of creates its own microenvironments. And from here, it's also your immune system's improper response to the situation that creates the scar tissue and adhesions. So it's not even, I used to think it was like an endometriosis cell that was kind of like Spider-Man, like shooting these like scar tissues and adhesions everywhere, like, oh, that lesion. But it's actually, it is your immune system chronically attacking this area. There can be a number of reasons for it. Lesions produce inflammatory immune factors. There's also often a ton of bacteria in the right around these lesions, excess blood called iron overload that can be very inflammatory. And we have this sort of sick ecosystem that's inviting your immune factors to come attack. It damages the tissues inside this really delicate area. Your peritoneal cavity is where your organs are. Like, your organs should slip over each other with this nice slippery immune fluid, and instead they're getting stuck together as if, my daughter had her knee scratched the other day on a rock, and just looking how the tissue is all torn up, right, and scratchy, like that's what happens kind of inside to a certain extent. And then your organs can even stick together, right, with the scar tissue. So it can get worse in that way. So it's this process that's unfolding. That is the process of endoing. What that reminds us is that there's a lot within our control. And when inflammation is the driving factor behind this disease, and then the immune dysfunction, which is is dysfunctional. Why? Well, you can point out a lot of reasons for immune dysfunction. Same with cancer, autoimmune, right? Chemicals, gut dysbiosis, poor nutrition, nervous system dysregulation, all of these different things. We realize, well, there's a lot in our control. With the question being, if we can lower inflammation and re-regulate the immune system, does this give us more hope for endometriosis? And the answer through research, not just anecdotally because of my experience and people I've heard from, is that yes, it absolutely can. And this is where the real hope for endometriosis comes in, I think, because, and I don't know why people don't talk about this more, is that when we look at endometriosis, I have 4 bodies of research that show how lesions are acting in humans, not animals. And it's through either imaging or through surgery. And they looked at if lesions, what they were doing over the course of a few years. Out of these 4 different studies, what they show on average, so some of them were a lot more and some of them were a little less, was that about 30% of patients had endometriosis that was progressive. That can be getting worse, different types of disease, progressing with scar tissue adhesions, or getting worse is just the size of the lesions in place of them. But what you have then is 70%. What was happening with them? Well, 30% were actually stabilized. Their lesions were not getting worse. So when we hear that endometriosis is only going to get worse, it's only going to be progressive, that's 100% not true. It looks to be true in a percentage, but if 30% is stabilized, what's the 40%? Well, 40% had their endometriosis regressing. That's getting better. The lesions were shrinking. Again, this is what your immune system should do when it is behaving normally. And Dr. Dan Martin, he's now the executive director of the Endometriosis Foundation of America. He wrote the foreword to my book, and he mentions if we can get the immune system back under control and behaving normally, it can give us advanced opportunity to take care of endometriosis. And that's what we need to be doing at all times, is thinking, how can I re-regulate the immune system and bring down inflammation? So the phrase I use is to stack my deck in the favor of regression or stabilization, because of the way science is and our inability to see specifics of how endometriosis is behaving, we can't say for certain everyone who does A, B, and C will have their endometriosis regress or stabilize, right? You could have really aggressive endometriosis. You could have a very a type that's easy to spread. There's 65 different types of endo. You could have that one that's just awful, right? And some people may have an endo that maybe responds a lot better to certain factors. But in general, it's like you stack your deck in the favor to support your body and getting the endometriosis under control. And that is the beauty of Heal Endo. And the book is to put the power, to ignite your power, right? To put the power back in your hands of chronic disease. I feel like Western medicine and endo activists, well-meaning as they are alike, are all trying to steal everyone's power and sell you. There's no cure. There's nothing you can do. Even surgery won't cure it, but everyone needs a surgery. But so few people can afford one. It's so confusing. But when you know what the disease is and you think, I can stack the favor, and yeah, I totally might need surgery or I might need medication, but it doesn't matter because I have taken my power back. I understand what endo is. I know that it won't always progress in some people, and I want to be that person. So what can I do to reclaim my life so I can be that healthy, happy person that I know I was meant to be, right? Without having to be a quote unquote endo warrior the rest of my life.
Yes. Oh, thank you for pointing that out. I love that. So it's so true because yes, we are endo warriors, but you don't have to be a warrior all the time. Taking your power back is the most important thing that I love how you teach. And this is, informing us to know all the options that we have. And I see it a lot in the endometriosis community where everybody's like, I need a surgery or getting hysterectomies. It's like, how about let's go back to the basics? Let's understand what endometriosis is, and then how can you do it? How do you do it for yourself? And everybody's so different. So, like me, I had a surgery, I had a laparoscopy, but
Did you have an excision with a
yes, I had an
specialist? Yeah.
excision. I got really lucky because I live in the Bay Area, so we have Stanford healthcare here. So,
Oh, so it's
luckily,
covered by insurance.
yes.
Oh, wow. That is great.
Yeah, I got so lucky. So, you see, it just depends on the scenario too, because a lot of people don't have access to excision surgery as well.
Everyone in Hawaii, the whole state. There's not one excision specialist here, private or public. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So
Yeah,
then
it's
what's
crazy.
the closest one to you? You have to fly somewhere else, like
You have
fly.
to fly somewhere else and then stay there for pre-op, surgery, and post-op. So you're looking at, and then you're out of state insurance. So it's like 60,000 minimum. It's heavy. Yeah. So I always feel very lucky for the people like you. And I was just talking to a reporter in Houston. She said they have 8 endo excision specialists within the Houston area that all take insurance. And those are really hopeful, awesome stories I hope everyone shares in their endo groups of who takes insurance and is a great surgeon.
Yeah, yes, it's true. I feel like, um, yes, I got so lucky in that case, but I know that more and more people are more aware of endometriosis, which is great. Like, I feel like within when I start first what got diagnosed with endometriosis was like in 2021. So it just like I feel like has progressed since then of
Mhm.
what people know about endometriosis. And your book is one of those big pillars for people to understand. So whoever has not gotten your book, Heal Endo, they literally need to go get it. It's like one of the best books I've ever read.
Oh, thank you.
It's really informative. I love your cute little like um drawings and like you just make it so simple, like sometimes being so like extra is not good. Like this disease is already crazy, so it's like let's make it simple. And so you make it simple and understandable. And
Yeah, you know who I wrote it for? I would think about my 24-year-old self who was just diagnosed because I wrote it when I was 35. And once you start reading PubMed, you get really used to all this terminology. And I see that terminology used on a lot of surgical websites and elsewhere where the normal average person who doesn't read PubMed like a crazy, like doesn't understand those phrases. So I did try to write it to me, my younger self at diagnoses, being very confused, very exhausted, not scientifically motivated in that way, so that it could be easily digested by more people.
love that so much. See, I could tell the intention of that. Like, I love that so much. That's a powerful exercise. I'm going to apply that in my book writing right now.
Yes, you should. Yeah.
That's a powerful tool. But I love how, your book really goes to the basics. And I want people to understand too, excision surgery like is the gold standard right now, but then not only surgery, you don't have to depend just solely on that. Like you could take your power back and, work on your diet. Like how are you eating on a, normal basis? How is your cortisol levels, right? How is your like what are you doing to activate inflammation in your body on a daily basis? Like a lot of us don't go down to the basics. Like we can't master
Hmm.
that. How do you think you're gonna feel better in the long run? Like even though you get this surgery, you feel better. Some people act after surgery feel even worse, right?
Yeah.
So it's not for everybody. And again, I'm the lucky one where after surgery I felt so much better because I did it with the excision specialist. Luckily, she knew what she was doing, and some people
Hmm.
aren't lucky. They get ablation surgeries and like they're worse off. It's
I
so
had 2 ablation surgeries.
no
Yeah,
way.
one here on Kauai and then one on Oahu with someone I thought was an expert, and we're definitely not an expert. But yeah, so I had 2 ablation surgeries, and then I learned more about excision and tried to find that. Yeah, surgery is a very nuanced conversation with endometriosis, and it's nuanced for so many reasons. And then you see where a lot of the anger comes from when you're not someone to recommend surgery across the board for people, because there's women who need a surgery so badly. And it could be either because their endometriosis is so advanced. This woman who I just spoke to had the craziest story of being gaslit for years and years and years, of actively seeking a diagnosis between 3 different states. And she's this, well-off woman seeing really good gynecologists, and they all had written her off until she finally, some colleague said, "Oh, maybe you should see an excision specialist," which she didn't know existed because no one had ever told her. And I'm like, "Oh, this is weird. This is 2024. I thought everyone knew about this stuff, but it's like not. People don't even know unless you're within the endometriosis community." And then when she finally got diagnosed, they said, "Oh, we should do surgery," and she had like almost a frozen pelvis, which is like where you have so much scar tissue that they have to like cut apart the organs that are all stuck together, right? It's like very, very advanced level of scar tissue. And so there's cases like that, which you say are like the worst case scenario. Like you absolutely need surgery. Your endo has been misdiagnosed or you've been ignored for so long. And what endometriosis can do is progress, right? So
Mhm.
if you're in that 30% that it has progressed and it's gotten so bad that you need a surgery 100%. So to say that some people don't need surgery doesn't mean that you listening to this don't need a surgery.
Yeah.
Some people absolutely need that. The question for these people is how long can you wait? Can you whittle down that inflammation in the meantime? Because, like you're saying, there's horror stories of women going into surgery and coming out, and because their bodies are so inflamed, they have so much going on. Their nervous systems from years of chronic pain are so dysregulated, you can't see left from right to a certain extent, right? So malnourished, so iron deficient, zinc deficient, all these things. And now you're expected to heal from a major wound, like a major surgery. People can develop thyroid autoimmune conditions, right? Hair falling out, things where you're like, my body was not ready for that level.
Yeah.
In which case, you say, can you take at least 3 to 6 months before surgery to build up your body to be prepared for that? Almost like you're building up your body for fertility to make an exceptional, I call them designer eggs, right? You want an egg that is so nutrient rich and so epigenetically wealthy to pass on to your offspring. And that takes months and months to do. Or even recovering from birth, right? You need to take months and months to heal all those tissues. So to do what you can before that surgery to give yourself the most optimal chance to heal well afterwards. So that's like where you can really utilize things like an anti-inflammatory diet, not to be confused with the crazy restrictive plant-based diet that we've all heard, right? Like I'm talking seaweed and bone broth and organ meats and, micronutrient rich vegetables and a blood sugar balance, things that like will infuse life back into your seemingly lifeless body. And I say that with empathy because when I was at my worst endometriosis, I felt like a corpse. I felt so bad. It was like it was a shell of me. I had no energy left. I had nothing to me. It was kind of a waif.
Yeah.
Um, and to infuse that body with the nutrients and the power to be able to recover from a surgery. And then there's people who also may need surgery who have minimal endometriosis, but it's in a really bad spot. So you can have like, a deep infiltrating nodule that is maybe like on your colon somewhere or on your uterus. And the deep infiltrating can often be so extraordinary painful that, every 3 weeks it's your period and you're vomiting and people, the doctor's saying, well, you just have minimal endometriosis. We don't know why. And getting that one nodule excised can change your life, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be the stage. It can also be the place or your sensitivity to it. Some people have more sensitive nerves, the nerve system. So there's that aspect to it. And then when you use that compassion to say, understanding that some people absolutely need surgery, it's also very possible that you won't need surgery. This was me. I never had an excision surgery, but I was very lucky that the diet and lifestyle and kind of the integrative care that I ended up undertaking was able to resolve my endometriosis symptoms. I say symptoms because I don't know what those lesions are doing, right? They could be gone. They could not. They could be stabilized. They could just be hanging out. Like, I don't know. But I am now so normal. Like, my period's normal. As an example, I got my period last night and I was embarrassingly very surprised. Like, I went to the bathroom and I was like, oh my God, like, I just got my period. Whereas that never happened a few years ago, right? I'd be like PMSing, my boobs hurt so bad. Everything was just off. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to get my period in probably like a week. This just goes on forever. So to be surprised is like, oh, wow, everything's really working. Like I have a normal flow. I don't have crazy symptoms of anything anymore. So whatever's happening to my lesions, I don't know. But my endometriosis, everything else I say is in complete remission because my body was able to respond to the interventions that I undertook. So when we kind of, give each other grace of where we are in our journey. Some women might need 2 excision surgeries, right? You hear you only need 1. Some women have gone back for 3. Are they an outlier? I don't know. Like it's there. Everyone has to own their own story. My story is very positive and full of life and hope. Some people's are a little darker, and we just have to meet our own bodies where they're at, be it involve surgery or integrative care. I've known women who cut out dairy and their lives were just like, oh, this is so easy. I don't have any pain or anything anymore. And you're like, wow, that was like really easy for you. But
Yeah.
everyone has their own endometriosis journey. And then understanding that, we can start to piece our own together.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I love how you talk about all the differences and how everybody is, is different, how endometriosis can show up differently. But what is one like tip or tips that you believe that people can just start, right? Because there's so much information out there. It's so overwhelming.
Hmm.
Like I really, that's why again, let's go back to your book. I love it because you put it all in there. I'm serious, like because when you're online, there's just so much. You're like, do this diet or do that, or this doesn't
I
work, or do that,
know.
and but then you're like literally giving the people or people with endometriosis their power back. Like, here's this information and this is what you can look out for and do. But if you want to give the listeners some tips here, so then, if they don't have the book or whatever actually helped or you think is very helpful to just start, like where can people start to begin? Because I feel like that's the biggest thing. Like,
Hmm.
because everybody's just seeking a surgery, I feel like right now, or they're just like, this is the only diet and we're supposed to do this diet only. And I'm like, dude, you don't have to do that.
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that because it was just a few days ago when I got back from Coquet and I was thinking, I'm so glad I didn't have social media when I was really deep in endo, which definitely dates me age-wise. But looking through it, and it's just like the hardcore veganism, hardcore carnivore, like FODMAPs are your issue. And it's just like thing after thing. And as a nutritional therapist professionally, I'm like, oh yeah, some of those could be really great for some people, except for I am honestly not a supporter of veganism with endometriosis specifically. And there's real scientific reasoning behind that. So I'll never support that. I understand it's like a religious issue. But if anyone out there is doing veganism for a health issue, I highly recommend not doing that. But
Oh,
all the other ones, and like carnivore, I could see that AIP, like you can see all these different where they fit in. But when you don't know anything about the specific diets or how they're interacting with the body, what they can do to help certain people on their path back to healing, it can get very confusing, very dogmatic. And then it's even more confusing when something kind of helps you and you're like, oh, this diet helped me. So if I'm even more and more restrictive, I bet I can get better and better and better. And this is something I did personally. I like whittled away all of these foods. I thought, if I'm a little bit better being gluten and dairy free, I bet I'll be a lot better if I cut out everything else. I'm like, eating like 10 different foods at some point, thinking, why do I feel so miserable? So, so there, I would say for people listening to this and they're thinking, okay, yeah, there's a lot of stuff on social media. What can many of us benefit from? If we're all unique, like what can you say? So one thing that is really important diet-wise is blood sugar regulation. And if you follow someone like the glucose goddess, for example, she will just tell you everything you need to know about blood sugar dysregulation. Blood sugar dysregulation can directly affect your lesions. So this is not like oh, it's making inflammation in my body. So sugar,
yeah.
glucose, right? It's a little scientific name. It's glucose molecule, reacts to proteins and it creates like a bond of stickiness. And you can think of if you get a lollipop stuck in your hair, right? It
Yeah.
sticks to your hair really different than it sticks to anything else. And it's because of this process of like it's sugar, protein, under a little bit of heat creates glycation. So that same glycation is actually what fuses veins together of diabetics. They have so much glucose in their system, right? Diabetics may end up having to get something like their feet amputated because of poor circulation. And that circulation came from damage to the circulatory system of glycation. So all the sugar fused with the protein to mash those the veins together. So this process of glycation actually provokes endometriosis lesions too. It creates something called AGEs, advanced glycation end products, and it binds to a receptor called RAGE, which is a receptor for AGEs. So AGE combines to RAGE. Endometriosis lesions have a ton of RAGE receptors on them. It's one of their epigenetic alterations. So if you have a bunch of AGEs circulating, this highly inflammatory component from protein and sugar, it will connect to your endometriosis lesion and produce a bunch of free radicals. So in this way, you could say it's it's like right at ground zero of your lesion, like an atomic bomb of inflammation is going off. And that's to having a lot of sugar in your bloodstream at once. So that's a direct association with lesions, potentially progression, scar tissue. And there's a separate issue of insulin, that your lesions also are altered. So they have all these weird behaviors, right? Which makes them that jacked, crazy Navy SEAL, that they produce like a byproduct from insulin that hides the lesions, so to speak. It's lactic acid. All cells produce lactic acid. Lesions produce a ton of lactic acid. And so if you have a ton of insulin and it's producing an exorbitant amount of this lactic acid, it hides the lesion from the immune system. So your immune system should, again, be cleaning up these lesions. But part of the issue may be it's invisible. I call it like an invisibility cloak. And what this also happens in is cancer. Cancer uses this lactic acid cloak to hide from the immune system. And if you've heard that sugar feeds cancer,
Yeah.
it's this mechanism that they're talking about. It's an invisibility cloak. And that's the exact same mechanism that we have in endometriosis, that the sugar, the insulin has created a lactic acid invisibility cloak. So when you put the glycation explosion, inflammation explosion, and you combine it with this lactic acid invisibility cloak, you see that too much sugar and insulin throughout your system is now directly affecting lesions in your disease. On top of that, it's an endocrine disruptor, right? It's a sleep disruptor. It messes with your entire bodily system. And the majority of Americans have blood sugar dysregulation. So you can presume that most people with endo also do. It's fairly easy to have blood sugar dysregulation in a society that stuffs sugar and highly refined carbohydrates into everything, and then pushes the carbohydrate-rich diet into a very sedentary society that doesn't need so many carbohydrates to begin with, right?
Yeah.
So this doesn't mean go keto. I'm not saying that. This isn't for the extremes here. It's regulating blood sugar, and there's great just basic people that do that on social media, like Glucose Goddess. I talk about it in my book. I have an ebook on my website, but there are a lot of people that do this, and it's pretty simple to understand. It's decreasing the amount of sugar and carbohydrates and eating fat and proteins first. Also, just increasing your protein quite a bit. I find a lot of women with endometriosis, actually, it's proven that people with inflammation need to eat almost twice the amount of protein just to keep their muscles from being broken down for repair. So we actually do need more protein. So if you can emphasize protein, eat that first, followed by your carbohydrate, you're on your way to being balanced. And then they have those continuous blood glucose monitors now. Those little, you see them in people's arms, that little dot, and it monitors your blood sugar all the time. So now you have a window to actually see what's spiking your blood sugar, because sometimes it's not cut and dry. You might realize that something like beans really spike your blood sugar, but something else that you thought spiked your blood sugar doesn't, like milk, for example. Everyone has their own sort of thing. So you can, if you have, it's I think like $150, or you can go to the doctor and get a prescription for one if you are on the blood sugar dysregulation spectrum. So it can be free, and spend 2 weeks monitoring your blood sugar. That's something everyone with endometriosis can benefit from. And it seems simple sometimes when you think of all of the ways in which it can affect the body and your endometriosis. And it's one thing you can focus on that will also allow you to eat healthy foods without cutting, a bunch of healthy foods out. You're just kind of removing a lot of the refined grains and reorganizing and prioritizing your meals. It can be a fun experiment.
Yeah, I love that. Wow, I never thought about that. That is true. A glucose test. I should do that.
You
But
should. Yeah, I learned a lot from mine. I really did.
yeah, and it's being curious. I think that's the main thing, is like
Hmm.
just being curious and just noticing and being more aware of your body. And I feel like a lot of us are just out of tune of like
Hmm.
who we are, and just even what we like or what our body doesn't like, just in general. And so it's like a great way to just tap into like, what truly is affecting us. I love that. And
Hmm.
the tip about protein. I truly believe that. Like, protein is so important, especially for women. I feel like a lot of women undereat protein.
Yeah, we do. And in the endometriosis world, a lot of that can be for a reason. That protein makes us feel awful.
Mhm.
Because I was a vegetarian and vegan on and off for 8 to 9 years.
Yeah.
And, through the process of that and a bunch of other stuff. And my whole digestive tract needed an enormous amount of rehabilitation. And that's with a lot of us with endo. But I could not break down protein, animal proteins for the life of me because you need so much hydrochloric acid to break apart these really complex amino acids. So eating something like a steak, I could feel, well, I never ate steak when I was
Yeah.
like that. You know, when you're a recovering
Yeah.
vegetarian, it was like something simple,
Yeah.
like chicken or maybe like a hot dog. But I could feel my food sloshing in my stomach 2 hours later. Like it was so not emptied, and it was trying so hard to digest that meat, and it couldn't. And on a much more severe example, I had a client who I worked with who would literally vomit when she ate meat. She said she was allergic to it. And all of her symptoms were screaming protein deficiency. So with these cases, I said, well, let's try supplementing with some hydrochloric acid, which is supplemental stomach acid, which you need to do carefully, especially if you have something like gastritis or inflammation in the stomach lining. But with just supplementation, suddenly she could eat as much meat as she wanted. And the same went for me. I needed like 7 pills, which is an extreme amount of pills just to digest like a cheeseburger sort of thing, like a burger without a bun. And but then you slowly rehabilitate your body's HCl making mechanism. You rehabilitate your stomach over time. And again, this is one of those reasons why working with someone who understands these things can be really helpful,
Yeah.
especially if you're having trouble digesting food. But that is one of the reasons I think that women do cut out meat with endo because their digestion is so impacted. We often have so many issues going on in our digestive tract. It just feels better to eat simple things, right? Like, don't make me digest complex fibers or high FODMAP foods or meat. You know, it's just too much for some sensitive bodies right now. You want to get there, but I do think that's slightly for a reason.
Oh, that makes so much sense. I never even knew that because I've been a carnivore my whole life, so I
Mm,
don't have a problem digesting. So if you go from like vegan or not eating like protein
yeah.
like that, then I can see how your stomach's like, I don't, what is this? What are you feeding me? What are
Do
you
you know
feeding?
what you need a lot of produced hydrochloric acid is zinc. You need a ton of zinc. And women with endometriosis are shown to be so zinc deficient that some research are saying it could be a potential marker for endometriosis. If you suspect endo in a patient, you could do a zinc test on them to see if they're also really low in zinc. It's much more possible that you could say, oh, it could be endometriosis. Like that's how significantly low we are. And then you need zinc to make hydrochloric acid. And in order to get zinc, you need to break down your best zinc sources are meat, right? So if you're not breaking down the meat properly, then you're not going to have access to the zinc. And without the zinc, so it's kind of a self-fulfilling cycle unless you start supplementing with the things like hydrochloric acid and then zinc, like some up to 30 milligrams a day, I like to say for 3 months. You don't want to knock other minerals out of balance, but many of us do extraordinarily well balancing our zinc levels.
Oh, wow. That's great tips right there. And you keep saying 3 months, but it does take about your 3 months for your cells to kind of like recuperate and like, develop, right? So it takes at least 3 months to see some type of changes in your body.
For the zinc specifically, I say 3 months because zinc competes, well, any mineral competes for space with other minerals. Your body only has so much space. So if you're taking a lot of zinc at high levels, you don't want it to start out competing copper and create a copper deficiency. You just want to bring up those zinc levels and then taper off and then see, okay, are my zinc levels sufficient enough that I can get my nutrients from my food, which is where you predominantly want to get your nutrients because of that example, right? Like if you're just taking one mineral, it can knock three of your other minerals out of balance, and all of a sudden you have a problem.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful with the amount of supplements that you're taking. And I kind of just target what is out of balance and try to bring it up and then kind of retest and see where you're at.
Oh, I love that. And you know, people are so into taking supplements, but again, they never go back to the basics of like
Mm,
what nutrient dense foods and what minerals I should be feeding my body first. Like what you said, you're like, you need to eat, like the food first to see
yeah.
and get those nutrients and minerals. And what do you suggest people eating like on a plate of, like on a daily basis? Like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, they should be at least eating, some type of protein, some type of greens, right? So what mine looks like is like eating beans. I'm like on this bean protocol thingy. So I'm eating a lot of fiber. I think it's been helping. Fiber, greens, and like some type of protein meat. So like that's like my non-negotiables every day for like breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
And that works great for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's where everyone is different. Because if you're listening to this and you have SIBO, which a lot of women with gastrointestinal issues plus endometriosis have, you might be thinking, oh my God, beans, like those are some of my worst enemies, right? It's like a food that has a bunch of fermentable carbohydrates that are great for someone that doesn't have SIBO, but really challenging for someone who's going to ferment that in the small intestine. So yeah, it's hard. It is hard to recommend specific foods for that reason that like everyone can be so different. But I'm with you. Absolutely. Like you ideally would have around, 30 grams of protein per meal. Greens, if you can tolerate them, are great. They're just so full of, the B vitamins you need, the micronutrients. They are absolutely wonderful. And then something like the starch of your choice. So even if that's white rice, there's something against white rice, but for some women that have really sensitive tummies, it doesn't have the fiber whole of brown rice. It doesn't have the fermentable carbohydrates of beans. It can be a nice, easily digested energy source, something like that. Or, fruit and veggies are your big time phytonutrient friends. And the phytonutrients are antioxidants. There's thousands and thousands of them that fight inflammation, bring it down. So that's where I'm thinking, it's where you hear eat the rainbow because different colored fruits and veggies have different phytonutrients. The phytonutrients give them the color. So like, the purple eggplant and sweet potato and dark berries and the red strawberries and bell peppers and the yellow oranges and peppers, those kinds of things. So mixing it up with diversity is really fun and important. The more diverse, the better. And I say that because your gut bacteria, there's thousands and thousands of different varieties, and they all eat different things. So the more diverse you eat, the more diverse your microbiome will be because you're feeding all of your microbe friends, their specific foods. But yes, filling up a plate like that, minimizing the carbohydrates, emphasis on the lower starch veggies and protein is great for everyone.
Yeah, and then trying to eliminate as much sugar and processed foods too, right?
Yes. Yeah, I talk about the 80-20 rule a lot because you don't want anything to be a crash diet. Crash diets are, they're the easiest thing to you fall off the quote unquote bandwagon. You don't want your life to be a bandwagon. You're falling off of and climbing back on all the time, think of like a yo-yo dieter from the 80s or Oprah, right? You want it to be a lifestyle where you're always doing the things that make you feel best while enjoying things that also allow you to have fun. So, if you have a favorite junk food and it doesn't cause you severe distress, for example, my mom is potato chips. She just loves potato chips. So she eats really well. And then sometimes she just needs to eat a big bowl of potato chips. And for her, that like really is great. She can eat super well and then have those. I bake a lot for my kids. Once you have kids, you're like, oh God, they really like big things. So,
Yeah.
so then that's kind of mine. I eat a lot of veggies and I eat a ton of meat, and then I eat baked goods here and there as well that we make at home. So yeah, if a lot of us, some of you listening to this might be eating a lot of junk food and a lot of purchased food, fast food, that kind of thing. And it's just slowly integrating this. Maybe you can make one meal a day, a home cooked meal that like Kathy and I are talking about. Look at the book, look at some ideas online and try to see what sounds good to you and do one meal a day. Next month, have it be two meals. Figure out how it works in your life because it does take more time, right, to plan these types of meals. And if you're not already doing it, it's like a whole new habit to create. So it can take months to get to a place where I am at. Like now it's no problem. I think, oh, I'm almost out of yogurt. I need to make yogurt.
Yeah.
Not many people think that, right? It's like, oh, how do you have time? But for me, I've already incorporated everything else that it's not that big of a deal. But you have to work up to that moment where all of a sudden everything feels very natural and you're not stressing about it. It's just, oh, this is my life. This is how I shop and cook. And then you can add in extras.
Yes, thank you for that tip. And at first, because I just told you recently, I just had a miscarriage in September. So then I took my power back again from after having Gemma, my 2-year-old. And so I was like, oh my God, how am I going to incorporate being a mom and then eating healthy? And we think of eating healthy as a big chore. But then when I started doing it, it was so easy. Like I was just like, because I used to eat so healthy already before trying to get Gem. back back in the day. No, just but
Feels like a lifetime ago, but it was like 2 years ago.
I know, yeah, it just feels so long when you're a mom in this like
Yeah.
2 year stage, it just feels like a long year. But yeah, it's just actually pretty easy. Like going to the basics, just steaming broccoli. It takes like
Mhm.
literally two minutes. Like, you wait for the water to boil and then you just throw it in, put some
Yeah.
salt, and then I'm like, why did I just made it believe that it was harder than it is. So when you actually take action to do it and try it out, you'll actually figure out that your head or your mind is making it harder than it really is.
Hmm.
And and then I'll tell my husband to go to like Whole Foods to get rotisserie chicken, like just plain rotisserie chicken so I can have it in the fridge. So when I'm hungry, I can have protein right there, you
Right,
know?
it's available. So even if it's not like the
Yes.
the best, most nutrient
Yes.
dense thing, like we see these really beautiful pictures, right?
Yes.
Like in blogs and social media. I'm like, what I eat actually is very different from that. But
Right.
exactly it. You have to have stuff on hand. So when you're hungry, you're not like, oh, F it, I'm gonna get the granola balls from
Yes.
the pantry because they're so easy. Like you need to be able to open your fridge and have things pre-made, pre-cut. And it doesn't take as much time as we think. It's
Yes.
A, shopping, and the B, preparation. Like if you have a cucumber in the fridge, are you much more likely to eat it if it's already chopped and in a Tupperware? Like, or is it just going to rot in your produce section of your fridge because it's a whole cucumber? And notice those things about yourself and make it easy for yourself. I say my one thing I do now is I always want future Katie to thank previous Katie, like Katie in history. Like Katie now really thanks Katie from earlier today that put those shoes away so that she didn't trip because they're in the middle of the kitchen, because when you're a mom, there's all these things around all the time. There's all these things to do. And I think I'll just make it easier for myself in the future. If I do it now, I'll thank myself. And so if it takes like 30 seconds to a minute, I just try to do it right away. And if you keep that mentality, like I'm going to thank myself tomorrow when I open the fridge that the carrots are peeled and the cucumber is chopped and I have this washed lettuce and a dressing is already made, right? And
Yes.
then learning to do those certain things. Like if you love salad bars, think of how you can create a salad bar in your fridge, right? It's pretty easy. You just need to have everything prepped and washed. If your challenge is protein, cooking all the protein all at once or buying it pre-made, pre-cooked and having it available is just really easy. They're great steps to move in that direction.
Yes, these little tips are such powerful way of like eating healthier and choosing to be on the healthier side, choosing to, give your body the nutrients it needs so you don't have these endoing flares and all this, pain that you
Hmm.
can avoid if you put some little effort into really starting to love your body, love yourself, and trying to understand it and feed it, good stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah, it goes a long way, I feel. And what I've learned with having endometriosis is endometriosis teaches me that I need a lot of love, a lot of self-love and self-compassion, and I feel like before that, like I was a people pleaser, putting everybody else first, but like endometriosis literally teaches you to like love yourself, take care of your body, stop listening to other people taking your power back. And I feel like that's why a lot of people with endometriosis were like fighters, we're um always trying to, advocate and whatnot. I feel like we're a certain type of group of women, which is very empowering. And this disease really does make you empower yourself, that's for sure. And
Yeah,
be
you
able
need to
to do that.
find it inside of you, right?
Yes, yes, for sure. I know it's already an hour. Like, wow, we talked so, like I could literally talk to you for hours and hours. But the last thing I wanted to hit upon is I don't think a lot of us talk enough about motherhood and what it means, like what it looks like when you have endometriosis and then you are a mom. A lot of us don't talk about it. We talk about like how do we get rid of this infertility or how do we get fertile with trying to get pregnant and being in all of that. But no one really talks about what happens afterwards, right?
Hmm.
It's it's already a tough thing trying to like make a baby and then having endometriosis, but then it's even tougher when you have a child and you really can't put yourself first, you know?
Yeah.
So, what are some tips or what do you do? Or you have two kids, so it's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a huge topic that it's really not discussed a lot. Like you said, so many people have a focus on infertility, which is obviously important because it's you need that if you want a child, you need to figure out how to have it. And then once you have the child, you're kind of lumped into this motherhood group.
Mm,
But having a baby, believe it or not, is really hard, right? And some women do so well with it. I was always in awe of like the friend that would have a baby and motherhood came so easy to them. They're like, this is what I was waiting for, and I feel so fulfilled. My situation wasn't like that. I had a very challenging labor, almost like PTSD inducing pain. And I never got to recover from that because you have the baby. And I don't think I realized how much the newborns don't sleep. I don't know if you were
yeah.
shocked by that. You hear they're up
Yeah.
all night, but you don't realize like sometimes it's every hour. Like,
Mhm.
okay, you go to sleep at 9 and now at 10 you're up. Now at 11 you're up. Now at 12 you're up. By 2 you're like, this can't go on any longer, but it does. At 3 you're up. At 4 you're up. And then it happens night after night for a week, right? Like sometimes it's 2 hours. And now that I look back, I'm like, well, it's not that long. It's like a few months of this, this disrupted sleep cycle. But when you are already dealing with inflammation and nervous system dysregulation, which a lot of us are, it can really knock us into something next level. Like the endometriosis symptoms can come back very fast for some people. Other women get autoimmune diseases. It's not uncommon for postpartum women, to suffer, postpartum depression and anxiety, really, really common in the endometriosis world. Postpartum autoimmune diseases. I ended up developing really bad eczema on my elbow, and I'd never had eczema before. And it was just something that came. It was like the sleepless nights, I look back on it as I had postpartum anxiety without realizing it because it's such a people pleaser and oh, this is fine. Everything's fine here. Like nothing to see. But in reality, I was like really freaking out inside. It was really, really hard. And all those advice you hear of putting your body first when you're recovering from a chronic illness, once you become a mother, you cannot put yourself first anymore. You always have to put the little baby first, or there's something going on and you end up being, for most of us moms, the primary person, whether we want to or not, whether dad wants to be there, like you often have the milk, right? Like the one that the baby goes to for cuddles. And so you kind of have to put on this different hat. And it was a really challenging time for me that eventually I had to realize how significantly it had impacted my nervous system. And it was through re-regulating my own nervous system that I actually realized I had nervous system dysregulation my whole life. And having a baby kicked it into full throttle for reasons beyond the baby, it wasn't the baby's fault. It was my own brain that couldn't stop. And changing the way I perceived the world actually changed my entire world for me. It was like, cleaning off a glass, and the glass had been etched some bad story, and someone cleaned it off, and I could look out the window and see, oh, life is actually really good and great, and nothing here has changed, but my everything of my perception has. And so, for any women out there that would, suffering from the same types of motherhood derangement syndrome in a way. It is so much like to be a mother and have a job and to keep the house clean and to cook whole foods meals and be a good wife and support husband's company. Like there's just so many things we're all juggling. Sometimes it seems impossible, but if we can reframe the narrative, kind of how we actually started the podcast, from one of panic and being unsafe to a world where we are safe and we have plenty of time, right? That was me, I had to reframe it. I don't have any time to I have plenty of time. I just keep saying it over. There's plenty of time. I'll get there. And then that kind of changes things, right?
Yeah.
So that was kind of the biggest thing that I did, a very long-winded way of saying. Re-regulating the nervous system for me was absolutely essential. What advice do you have for moms conquering it all?
Yeah, the biggest thing is really reframing and changing your perspective, right? So we're always looking at the negative aspect. I think what has helped me truly was like being there for Jem. And then when I had free time, I would take time to like either meditate or walk around like the neighborhood, going outside or doing something that makes me happy, even watching
Hmm.
silly TV. I know sometimes TV is the worst thing, but sometimes putting something funny on, like whatever it is for you, just go do that and don't feel guilty for it.
Mhm.
And last but not least, asking for help. I think that's one of the biggest things, right? Because I'm a person who's like, I'm gonna do it all. I'm gonna do it. And then it's like, no. Like he can't do everything. So I asked my husband
Totally.
George to step up. I'm like, I need you to do the dishes. Like I cannot keep doing this. Like you need to step up. Come home and do the dishes for me because I can't do it, you know?
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
and you know what? There's this thing that when you're around other women, that we're all very like kind of in tune. You see things that need to get done. And so women often like help each other out in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll get resentful. And this is not necessarily like, oh, all sexes are, the same to put them in groups. But in general, what I've noticed is that men are less likely to see what we see that needs to get done. Like if it's off of their priority task, they won't think about it. But if you ask them, they'll do it. But for the most part, it's like, oh, right, of course. And I think of how like guys text. Have you ever looked at guys' texts? They're
Yeah.
just so direct. I'm like, if I texted my friend that, she'd think I was pissed at her.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so direct. And but then you think that's how I actually started communicating to my son this way. I'm like, he's not getting my big flourishes and my enormous sentences. It's like, Elias, put your shoes on the shoe rack. Okay. Not like when you come home, you need to take off your shoes, do these things. So, a lot of men do a little better with directness, and us being more sensitive often, especially with endometriosis. And if we're nervous, we have issues going on with our nervous system, we feel like they should see these things and we get resentful, which can make us more sick, right? So yes, asking for help
Yeah.
for me was hard, really hard. So I'm glad you bring that up. But learning how to ask for help, you learn the worst they can say is no.
Mhm.
And then you're back where you started, right? But like if you always assume you need to do everything without asking, that's a whole lot of assuming that's going on.
Yes. And then like you said, you get resentful. So it's
Mhm.
it's really taking like
It's igniting your power. You have to ignite your power.
yes, I love how you kept saying that. It's true. It really is because we are such empathetic people, like especially women. I'm not trying to be sexist, but like we have more of that motherly instinct of like caring for others more, or like, thinking of others more in that sense. And it's like you don't have to take off on all the load all the time. Like asking for
Hmm.
help is okay, even if it's from you know, my mom or like, the in-laws. It's okay. Or like
Hmm.
even asking for a friend or a sibling, like, hey, can you just help me with this one task? That'd be just fine.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's great advice.
Thank you. Yes, and thank you for all your amazing advice today. Like honestly, I could talk to you for hours. This
Maybe
is
we'll do another one.
Yeah, I feel like we didn't even really touch upon anything, all the things that I want to talk about. But every time I talk to you, I always learn something new, which is so amazing. Like your knowledge and the way you seek for knowledge and answers and to help other people, truly, I can just feel the energy. I can see it through all the work that you do. And so,
Well,
like,
thank you.
even just being able to talk to you and just pick a little bit of your brain is just such an honor. So thank you for today. Like honestly, from the
Yeah,
bottom,
I hope it was helpful for anyone listening to this.
like every time I talk to you, this is the third time I talk to you, and I like every single time like it's amazing. Like, you know. So
I hope I don't have too much of a lisp, do I? I just got Invisalign and I forgot to ask you if I should take it out or not. But if anyone thinks I'm talking weird, it's 'cause I just got these Invisalign like two
no.
weeks ago.
And then you just did a procedure too, right? Like something with your
Yeah, I got my tongue tie released. So my tongue is not swollen anymore. So it's just the
oh,
Invisalign that's doing the little bit of a lisp.
maybe we could come back and have you talk about that too, because I know a lot of
Yeah.
people have questions. You were posting about that on Instagram, which
It
is
was really crazy the amount of difference. Yeah, I'm gonna talk with Cindy, endo fertility dietitian, about that in 2 weeks. So if you listen to this podcast later on, I guess after March 2025, you could also, I think we're gonna talk all about that.
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna go listen to that episode too. I've gotta like go check that out. That's awesome.
Yeah, there's so many cool things to learn about with the body and endo and the weird connections.
Yes, there it really is. We can talk for hours. But last but not least, where can the listeners like find you or find more about you and where can they get your book? I know it's on Amazon for sure. I have the Kindle version, which is so amazing. I can literally like copy and like everything I'm like putting it into my notes like I'm
Oh,
highlighting.
you can do that on Kindle? I
Yeah.
don't have a Kindle, so that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So it'll like save like whatever you highlight, I'll put it in like a notes section. And then like you can
Ah.
download it into your laptop too if you want to.
Oh, that's great. That's really helpful.
Yeah, it is. So I was like,
I'm
oh, I
so
don't have to like
old-fashioned.
personally like write it
Yeah.
down or like highlight. So yeah.
Yeah.
It's super helpful.
Yeah, so that is Amazon. I just asked the other day if I can get it somewhere else from Amazon so people don't have to support a big corporation. Unfortunately or fortunately, Amazon prints on demand. So as a self-published author, I don't have to order 10,000 copies and ship from my house. So it's open doors for self-published authors, to have a life outside of shipping books.
Yeah.
So it is, but it's also on, I mean, it's on other corporation websites. I think you can get it on Walmart and barnesandnoble.com, but the same thing, they're printing on demand. So unfortunately, that's kind of the main thing, but do think of fortunately, I get most of that, the
Yeah.
proceeds. So even though Amazon gets a cut, you're supporting me. So yeah, you can find it Amazon or Walmart. I am at healendo.com, and that is a really extensive website that's free. I don't have any ads on it popping up all the time. It's just all about endometriosis and integrative care. Like, what is endo? How can we heal from it? Start learning about the disease and symptoms. And then I'm on Instagram at heal.endo. And I post stuff on there from time to time too.
Yeah. You can like listeners go follow her everywhere. Go get her book. Like I seriously
So sorry.
I can't even I'm like not a big endorser, but I truly am not. But like your book is literally one of the biggest life-changing things ever, and I love all your content. Like you even write blogs. Like you're seriously out here to help people understand and ignite their power. So thank you for being that amazing soul being that you are, and thank you for being
Oh,
here
thank
today.
you. Yeah, it was lovely. Yeah, it was nice talking.
Huh.